Halo, iya, ini belum kedengeran kayaknya. Di saya nggak ada suaranya. Cek, cek. Em, Cek, cek. Okay. I think I still get a problem with my speakers.
Distinguished resource persons, distinguished participants, colleagues, friends, and all of the participants. First of all, I would like to give congratulations and also appreciation to PPI Belanda for hosting the conference on Indonesian Youthquake 2020. Our today's world that we live in now is facing many global challenges. The global challenges that we face today is not only limited to poverty, climate change, environmental equality, or even health. We have a very big global challenges that we need to have an answer to it. In relation to this, the holding of the conference itself is timely and also relevant with those global challenges that we live in. We need to respond to these global challenges in a not only concerted but also sustained efforts. All action needs to be put together by everybody. Everybody needs to participate. So no one is left behind, or no country should shy away or stay away from answering these global challenges. The contribution and also participation is essential, and in this context, the youth participation is indispensable. Why? I think we all know the answer. Because youth is the future. All of you will be our future. You will have not only the role to maintain, but also renew or refresh the status of the current society. My hope for all of you here is not only you can benefit from the expertise of all of the resource persons who will be contributing to this conference, but also can share experience, lesson learned between you, the participants, with the resource person, and also among all of you. I wish a very good conference, success, and also stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Halo semua, berbicara soal pemuda, juga berbicara soal inspirasi. Pemuda identik dengan keingintahuan tinggi dan pencarian jati diri. Pertanyaannya sekarang adalah, apakah gelombang pemuda ini mau kita arahkan ke arah yang baik atau buruk bagi bangsa Indonesia? Mereka butuh sosok yang inspiratif. Mereka butuh orang yang mampu mengarahkan ke arah gerak yang benar dan strategis. Sehingga kelak pemuda juga mampu menginspirasi generasi selanjutnya. Pemuda juga soal sinergitas. Kini, pemuda Indonesia tidak hanya tersebar di 17.000 pulau yang ada di bumi Khatulistiwa, tapi juga tersebar di seluruh dunia. Mereka belajar dan bekerja untuk menjadi harapan bangsa Indonesia di masa depan. Melihat potensi-potensi ini, alangkah lebih baiknya kita bisa mewadahi mereka dan memfasilitasi mereka dengan suatu hal sesuai dengan minat bakat mereka. Apalagi di era kenormalan baru seperti sekarang, ini bukan sebuah halangan. Ini adalah tantangan dan peluang bagi pemuda Indonesia untuk maju dan beradaptasi di dalamnya. Kami yakin adanya inspirasi, adanya sinergisitas, pemuda Indonesia akan mampu menciptakan energi yang besar. Bukan energi biasa, tapi energi yang dapat membawa perubahan bagi Indonesia yang lebih baik dan bermartabat di masa depan. Oleh karena itu, kami dari PPI Belanda mengadakan sebuah acara yaitu Indonesian Youth Week 2020 dengan tema Breaking Through the Next Normal, The Role of Youth as Game Changers, sebagai sebuah wadah bagi pemuda Indonesia di seluruh dunia untuk tetap kontributif, produktif, dan solutif bagi Indonesia di era kenormalan baru seperti sekarang. Kami menghadirkan rangkaian acara seperti webinar, workshop atau pelatihan, dan lomba supaya para pemuda Indonesia yang ada di seluruh dunia tidak hanya bisa berdiskusi, tapi juga mengaktualisasi diri mereka sesuai dengan minat dan bakat mereka. Indonesia Youth Week 2020, we are the game changers.
Halo semua, aku Aga, Sekretaris Jenderal PPI Belanda. Saat ini, seperempat dari bangsa kita dipenuhi oleh pemuda. pemuda selalu memiliki peran yang penting dalam sejarah bangsa kita. Dari perjuangan pemuda daerah yang melawan penjajahan tanah air, sampai peran Indonesia yang membawa marwah bangsa Indonesia ke tingkat dunia. Karena itu, kita harus terus membangun diri bersama pemuda untuk menciptakan generasi penerus masa depan bangsa yang tangguh, mandiri, dan berdaya saing tinggi, terlebih lagi untuk memasuki era revolusi 4.0 dan peluang bonus demografi. Menyadari pentingnya peran pemuda menuju masa depan bangsa, yuk kita bersama-sama mengembangkan potensi kita, meningkatkan sinergi dan energi pemuda, serta menjadi inspirasi untuk bangsa.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the grand webinar entitled New Normal, Is There Still Room for Sustainability? So this webinar is organized by Indonesian Youthquake 2020, Indonesian Students Association in the Netherlands, also known as PPI Belanda. And I'm going to moderate today's discussion. My name is Aldi Gusinara. I'm currently a PhD candidate in the Faculty of Technology, Policy and Management, TU Delft. My research focuses on studying the emissions embodied in global trade and global economies in general. Also, how it relates to the responsibility allocation between nations and development challenge in general for emerging nations. So, to give a bit of a context about why this topic has been adopted in this occasion. So, the basic consensus when we talk about sustainability is that resources are limited in supply, and today's decision and action will be affecting that of the future generation. So the Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations codifies the different goals surrounding sustainability that society should achieve. Indonesia itself has scored 64.2 out of 100 in the global index ranking of the completion of the goals. Youth, in this context, play an essential role as their actions today and will have a direct consequence on their way of living in the future. So in Indonesia, youth have begun to be aware of the term sustainability, but we loosely indicate that it's just merely as a trend rather than a working framework to be implemented for the development. So yet given the current situation, this pandemic, the attention to this topic has been, well, set aside, I should say. It's natural. I mean, in this discussion, we intend to understand how this current situation can affect or even can bring the opportunities for us to gain momentum related to the SDGs, especially from the youth perspective. To discuss these issues, we are honored by the presence of three speakers with us. Well, it's supposed to be four, but Mrs. Anditsa is not able to join us today. So firstly, we have Mr. Sony Mumbunan. He's a lead environmental economist and research associate at World Resources Institute Indonesia. He got his PhD in economics from University of Leipzig. I hope I spell it correctly. His working experience include working as a policy advisor in UKP 4. It's a special working unit under the direct command of former Indonesian President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. And also, again, under President Joko Widodo between 2016 to 2017 in the Presidential Staff Office. He was also a delegate sent by the Republic of Indonesia in several United Nations lead talks on climate change. And he currently leads policy research regarding climate change economics and low carbon development in Indonesia as a senior economist at WRI Indonesia. So Mr. Sony Mumbunan, welcome and thank you for being able to join us today. And our second speaker from the healthcare industry, Mr. Rolof Mulder. He's a CEO of Hospitainer. So Hospitainer came into realization after Mr. Rolof Mulder witnessed for himself how expensive high-tech medical infrastructure installed in Western Africa, and which is an area of a poor region. His vision with Hospitainer is to provide containerized medical solution that can be rapidly deployed in the post-disaster areas, conflict areas, and developing countries. The company itself operates in countries across 4 continents, including Indonesia. So welcome and thank you for being able to join us, Mr. Roloff Mulder. And lastly, we have with us Mr. Lane Zevenbergen. He's a leader in technology and author of a book entitled Once Upon a Future. He's a technology entrepreneur, leader in sustainability, TEDx speaker, and also a best-selling author. Yeah, he founded a series of companies in technology, and most notably in 1985, he founded the first AI, artificial intelligence company in the Netherlands called Bolesian. He has given talks over various topics about sustainability and technology in general in the Netherlands and abroad. So, yeah, also welcome and thank you for being able to join us, Mr. Lane Zevenbergen. So, this webinar will be divided. Well, currently will be divided into 2 sessions. There will be the first 2 speakers, Mr. Sonny Mumbunan and Mr. Roloff Mulder. And then after the first 2 speakers, we're going to have a short break and we're going to watch some videos and entertainments. Also, you're welcome to send in your questions through the live chat at any moment. And also, don't forget, there's a little prize sponsored by OW or OI Indonesia for the best question, with the conditioning of filling up the evaluation form that will be shared at the end of the webinar. So, yeah. Okay, without further ado, let's start the first session of this webinar, starting with Mr. Sonny Mumbunan, who will share his knowledge about sustainable development in Indonesia. So, I'll hand the screen to you.
Thank you, Aldi, for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, PPI Belanda. Semoga sehat-sehat di masa sulit ini. I'll use my 15 minutes, and please remind me for timing. I'll share a screen, and I hope you guys can see it. Is it working?
Let's see. We still haven't seen the screen.
1 minute. Still not sharing, yeah? 1 minute.
Yeah.
So there's some technical issue here. It says that it's being blocked by the. 1 minute. Should you just send to the team? Aldi, could you take over, please? Just 1 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Do you mind if I put the second speaker to do first?
No, just give.
So you can have time to prepare that. Yeah.
Just 1 minute, if that is okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I'll hand this problem to the technical team. And yeah. Yeah, I think it's the same problem we had previously. So if they say do not click on the question asked, but only select the screen to share, if it's possible.
Yeah, 1 minute. I hope you guys have received it. Really sorry about that.
Yeah, it's totally fine. Remember choice.
No, it is.
Okay, how is it, Mr. Sonny?
I have sent the file.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think it's working. Could you please put it on? Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Is it possible if we like switch? Do you mind if I switch the speakers, like the second one, or should we wait for another minute to?
I think you guys cannot open it.
Yeah.
So we can just switch.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I can just go directly to the second speaker, Mr. Roloff Mulder. Could you please? Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'll hand you the screen from now. Thank you.
Okay, I will share my screen.
Sure.
All right. It's a pleasure to be again with you. I was also with you yesterday. So just for the people who were not here yesterday, a short introduction of what we do. I will quickly go through the screens and not read all the text, but we work a lot with the UN. We make mobile hospitals. We work especially in Colombia and Indonesia on a more long-term sustainable project for healthcare in rural areas. And we use shipping containers because these shipping containers are really easy to transport, very strong. We can prepare them. And we have 4 main concepts, as you can see, on the ground, on wheels, on water, by aircraft. And these are all like Lego modules, so it can be surgery, but it also can be dental, for instance, in a container, or X-ray, sterilization, but also infectious diseases labs. And during this present health crisis, we quickly switched to to coronavirus treatment centers and laboratories for testing. We did a lot of these centers in Romania, in the Caribbean with our government, but also with other NGOs and companies, European Union. And pleasantly, that's one of our biggest concerns at the moment. But to give some background from the past, to give you just a few examples. In Haiti, after the earthquake, we delivered in 3 days 6 containers as a surgical unit for Doctors Without Borders, and in 10 months, about 2,000 surgeries were done. Another example is from the Philippines after the Typhoon Yolanda, where we sent by aircraft containers, and as you can see, it's a unit with solar. Everything for 2,000 surgeries is inside, even the washing machine, and clothes for the doctors, because everything can be destroyed. It was indeed destroyed over there. So you see the surgeries that were done because the maternity hospital collapsed. And with Doctors Without Borders, we also did on the Mediterranean ships for refugees. And we work a lot in conflict areas, especially for women, with UNFPA, around giving birth, gynecological research, but also sexual violence. Unfortunately, there's a lot of sexual violence in conflicts. And we do complete mobile hospitals that can be installed very quickly. So we deliver from stock, and that's why we perform very fast. Now, I'd like to come now to the sustainable part. And this is what we call healthy villages. And in the sustainable goal number 3 is not only talking about health, but also well-being. And we believe that a village can be healthy if it's not only healthcare, but also economic growth, good food, education, this all employment, and this will all work towards well-being of the whole village. But we start with the clinic, and you can see here the clinic. I will explain a little bit later. And then around the clinic, you can start building food. Healthy food will help patients to heal better. It's an example for the farmers in the area. Small shops. This is not a real design, but just a schematic design, and also the church, a mosque, schools, etc. So I would like to give an example of Colombia. We are presently already doing this in Colombia. We are starting in Indonesia. We have traveled many times to Indonesia and also spoke with a lot of organizations in Indonesia. And we're also going to pilot in Indonesia and different sites with this project. But I give an example of Colombia because we're a step further there. This is a state in Colombia, Guinea, very far away from the main cities, and where really there's a lack of healthcare. And the facilities are outdated, access is very challenging, there's poor communication equipment. And what you see right now is that people have to travel a long time to the main hospital in Irida, and they have to go by boat on the rivers, but it can take 3 days, and it's risky because they can die during the travel, and maybe they don't have to travel if they are treated before in the clinic, if it would be closer to their home. So what we try to do there is to improve the healthcare accessibility. These are the challenges that were set out by the Colombian government. And also to predict certain diseases by using artificial intelligence and improve communication between the primary healthcare and the hospital, and provide training and gather data and have local ownership. It's very important to have the community itself being in charge, and we want to support them for a long term. So this is an example of a primary clinic on solar. And as you can see here, this is in a village. It's raised because of the floods. The same clinic can also sail on the rivers and visit villages, and we also plan to do that now in Indonesia. Here you see the real boat that is sailing the rivers right now. And the primary healthcare clinic is suited for prevention, consultation, delivery room, dental, and the batteries are there for the solar system, and it can be placed in the areas where the need is there, so where it's needed, instead of bringing the people to the main hospital. So it's very important to have a plan where to put these clinics, and what we want to do in Indonesia is trial different places where we can learn a lot about geographical, cultural, and other healthcare challenges to be able to multiply and to spread out. If we cannot go by boat or by truck, we can also with the helicopter bring the units to areas like Indonesia. You have mountainous areas where it's really hard to get clinics, material for clinics there. So we can bring them to these areas as well as what we do in Colombia. From the primary healthcare clinics, the small puskesmas, you can go to a bigger puskesmas. And this is like a star network. So when the person cannot be treated in the small primary puskesmas, they can be sent to this one. And there you have basic surgery, for instance, X-ray laboratories, more extended laboratories, some rooms for beds, etc. This is just modular, so it can be extended as needed. So these units will also be placed strategically, and of course not so much as the primary healthcare clinics, because the primary healthcare is really the most important. If you're there, if you're treated there in time, a lot of costs can be saved, a lot of lives can be saved, and it can prevent illnesses to increase. And but all this is really important, to have a very good communication system between the different units. For instance, between the main hospital and the extended clinic and the primary healthcare clinic, we can use tablets, phones, etc., and satellite connection. And all the tests can be sent also to doctors that have more knowledge than maybe the nurse assistant in the primary healthcare clinic. And also the NGOs, academies can use this network to train people in remote areas. But also the people in the remote areas have access to the internet, have access to contact with the family, which makes it much more attractive to work in the rural areas. And this will also contribute to sustainability of the healthcare there. So back to the complete picture. We start with the clinic, because if you place a clinic, you have already solar power, you have water, we can even drill a borehole, you have management, and from there, with NGOs, we can work on the other sectors like agriculture, education, and so on. But the basis is the medical unit, and from there you start. So if you put it in a screen, the community development starts with the clinics, whether it's fixed or sailing, but we can add these other services, and people will be going there to the clinics and to the villages, but also at the same time access all these other services, by medicine, by solar panels, etc. So this way, this is my last slide. We believe that we can contribute to not only healthcare, but also well-being of the whole village. And that's what we see as a holistic view on health. And I want to mention that we don't want to just bring this on ourselves, but we partner with Indonesian NGOs, big NGOs even. And we believe that local ownership is really important for sustainability, also a long-term service center that we want to set up in Indonesia. So thank you so much. This is the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roloff. Okay, Mr. Sonny Mumbunan, can you confirm that the slide can be displayed right now?
No, I think the colleague will share the screen, so yeah. So not from
Oh.
they got the slide already.
Yeah. Okay, I can hand you so okay, can start now. visible.
Thank you again. Really, my apologies for the technical glitches. Again, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be with PPI Belanda. I will somewhat deviate from the TOR, but more or less is still are still on track. So, could you please move to the next slide? Yes. So you know these visualizations. 16 goals plus one on governance, on corporations, and with a bunch of targets, 169. The issue with this is these are actually interconnected. They are co-defining, or they are defining one of another. But then the way we approach them are somewhat compartmentalized. Please continue. Next, please. Yeah. Just to provide some updates. So in Indonesia, we have a presidential decree on this released in 2017, and it frames some regulatory frameworks on the structure and organization for SDG, the team, the working group, expert, and so on and so forth. And also the so-called SDG, sorry, that's FDG, SDG roadmap, national action plan, and then at the subnational level action plan. Next, please. So if you guys look at the Bappenas, the Ministry of Planning, Development Planning official website, there is so-called SDG dashboard. So you can see developments, maybe if you're interested in monitoring. So there are efforts on building and populating this dashboard with the latest information. Next, please. Now, the thing is, the SDGs are being developed through a global effort in consultation with national, of course, level. And at the same time, at the national level, there are also ongoing process. Like in Indonesia, we have the RPJMN, so the midterm development planning. The one that I show in the slide is the one referring to the previous one, before the 2020-2024. Now I show here so-called the outcome indicators, the macro indicators for development. You see, like inequality, economic growth, poverty. So these are, among others, sort of the macro indicators that are supposed to be in the development planning documents and process. So these are more or less the highest in the hierarchy of indicators. At the same time, we know that when it comes to SDGs, you have different indicators with different hierarchies implied. At the latest development planning document, and this is one of the first in the world of its kind, we have for instance, the emission indicator in our development planning. So that's quite heartening to notice that Indonesia has such an indicator. Next, please. So as a follow-up on the presidential decree in 2019, Bappenas issued roadmap of SDGs toward 2030 is also downloadable if those interested in the document. They can look at the Bappenas SDG Secretariat website. Please continue. Who's next? Next, please. Now it's an extensive document roadmap, but I'll pick one part of this on the so-called on the section on future prospect. So those who are developing the roadmap, they think there are some leverages that can be identified that will optimize sort of the achievement of SDGs. I zoom it here. It's still not so visible to see, but if you guys look at these, then you don't really see climate change in here. Okay, and I would like to comment a number of things of these. One is even within Bapenas, you have different people working on different areas. They may have, different ways of looking at things. They may have differences in, epistemic understanding on reality, on things. For instance, here they don't mention climate change, or at least not seeing climate change as important. And it becomes interesting to discuss about sustainability in the absence of climate change. That's one thing. The second one would be, this is also reveals a challenge. Different people, even within an institution, a ministry, can have different understanding on things, let alone different line ministries, different agencies at different scale, national, subnational. So this is something that we need to anticipate. That can be part of a challenge when we discuss about SDGs. Next, please. Indonesia has committed to climate change, to the convention, to the United Nations Climate Change Convention. So the president at the UNFCCC COP21 in 2015 in Paris has agreed, and Indonesia has already a bill on that. So Bill 16, 2016 on the on Paris Agreement. So it's quite high level commitment from the president, from the presidency, the country. It needs to be reflected into the way we look at things. Please, next, please. Now, speaking of SDGs, I think it implies, interactions or cross, interaction or intersections between sectors, health, or fisheries, or agriculture, or education, across actors, private, public, researchers, indigenous community, women, across scales, global, national, subnational, local, across themes, across dimension, economic, governance, environment. So this is challenging, and that implies even more importance on the need for integration. And integration here means both for method of looking at things, but also process, involving different sectors, actors, scales, themes, and dimensions when we talk about SDGs. Next, please. Now, I would like to invite you to what is going at the moment at the planning ministries, which defines largely the planning document for 2020 to 2024. So Indonesia's forthcoming midterm development planning. So it tries to integrate different dimensions, sectors, scales, using a system approach, and these differences or areas or themes, there are interacting simultaneously. So at least the way we see things for the planning has considered these challenges and has already been institutionalized into planning document. Bapenas call it Low Carbon Development Initiative, LCDI, and it tries to institutional link the strategic environmental assessment, KLAS, Kajian Lingkungan Hidup Strategis, into the planning document and the way they see SDGs. If you click it, and it will appear the SDGs. Next, please, just click it. Yeah. It's animated. So you see different SDGs are relevant on which part of this. You see population, economy, energy, water, are, in terms of modeling, like modules presented here, but they're all interacted. I think this is I think this is an advances that made from what has been seen as a challenges and needs for improvement in the past exercise. Next, please. And these are policies. Next, please. Now, if we run or if we look at SDGs as a system as presented in the previous slide, then you see different sort of visualization or new understanding on the way we look, for instance, between economic growth and our emission commitment, and how it creates employment, how it reduces poverty, how it creates jobs, and so on and so forth. And Bapanas did some simulation exercise on comparing between business as usual and some scenarios on low carbon development. And then they compare into Indonesia's commitment to the UNFCCC through what has been submitted through the Nationally Determined Contribution, or NDC, which is basically Indonesia's commitment to reduce with its own effort or with international support. So you see, if it is business as usual, that there is a tendency in Indonesia's economic growth. This is a simulation from 2018 to 2045. So it's quite a long-term simulation. There is a tendency for Indonesia economic growth, if it is, stay as business as usual, that economic growth will continue to decrease. If it introduces some intervention on low carbon development, then there is a potential that it will increase. And if it gets more ambitious, the level of ambition in some of emission is increased or enhanced, then there's a likelihood, or the likelihood is even higher to have even more higher economic growth, say 5% to 2025, and then after 2025 we may experience economic growth at 6%. So there is an opportunity that low carbon development, may be also benefiting Indonesia. Next, please. Another benefits from low carbon developments include, emission reduction even higher than Indonesia commitment, which is only 41. The low carbon development can offer even 43 emission reduction compared to the baseline. And then 6%, as I mentioned, and reduce poverty to 4.2%, and add new jobs like 15.3 million jobs to the economy, and lower investment compared to our production capacity. So we see a number of benefits that can be coming out from low carbon development if we choose to do these. In the planning documents before COVID-19, we have institutionalized these in the official document process and institutions. The thing is how to ensure that it is implemented during the forthcoming midterm planning. And then come COVID. Please next. This is the slide, the last slide. So we are now in the time of what WRI call a convergence of crisis. You have a health crisis due to COVID-19. Now we have an economic crisis. It's obviously a recession at the moment. We have a climate change crisis. You may want to add biodiversity crisis. And these crises also link back to, say, the way pandemics emerge. Epidemiologists mentioned about what they call a pre-emergence phase through habitat loss, land use changes, which release some of the viruses, which just wait for the opportunity for new hosts. And because of the integration of our economy, our travel, then when it fits, then it spreads like pandemics. Now we are experiencing the very impact of COVID-19 pandemics, and I think we may want to link this to the whole sustainable development and convergence of crisis discussion. So that is more or less what Indonesia have achieved, have evolved in terms of sustainable development. I hope I have provided some of the latest status. I think it's fair to say that I'm not representing the government here. I used to work as an advisor to the government, but I'm not working, so I'm not representing. I'm just telling some of the research that we are also doing with the government and with some of the researchers in Indonesia. So be mindful that I'm not representing the government or any public institutions here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sonny Mugunan, for sharing your insight. But about the latest, I should say, information about sustainable development goals in Indonesia from the perspective of government. So before moving on to the next session, we'll now have a little bit of like break. We're gonna have a video performance from our performers, Natso and Angela. So please enjoy.
Mentari terbenam, temani dalam kesendirianku, temani aku dalam kepedihan ini, ku bertahan. Mentari terbenam, beri semangat baru untuk jiwaku, beri kicauan menutup hidupku ini, ku bertahan. Aku pasti bisa menikmati semua dan menghadapinya. Aku yakin pasti bisa. Mentari terbenam, beri semangat baru untuk jiwaku, beri kicauan menutup hidupku ini, ku bertahan. Aku pasti bisa menikmati semua dan menghadapinya. Aku yakin pasti bisa. Aku pasti bisa
Okay. Yeah. Before we start the next session of this webinar, I'd like to express our gratitude to our sponsors and media sponsors in realizing this event. Yeah, without their support, our event will not be as big and as successful as it is. So yeah, our sponsors are Hospitainer, Dufik Neso, thank you so much, Hydrodiesel, Ofedco, OW or OI, Indonesian Embassy, and Commandikbud. And also our media partners are Kompas TV, Caldera News, Belindo Magazine, Brilio, and Business Indonesia. Okay. Lastly, our third speaker, Mr. Lane Zevenbergen. Please, Mr. Lane.
Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you.
Assuming that I can start now, I would like to greet everybody. And before I start sharing the screen, I think I want to give a pragmatic view on sustainability, and especially what it means for young people. To give you an example, I have 5 children, and the oldest one is 32, and the youngest one is 19. The youngest one is a girl that is starting to do her studies, and I have 3 boys and 1 girl. The girl, my oldest daughter, has a company in sustainability, and she produces stone paper. So she created 5 years ago a company that is attacking the paper industry. The paper industry is one of the most polluting industries, cutting forests all over the place, also in Indonesia, and does not want to change. So she is a real activist. So she is just, boom, fighting the paper industry. And I like that. She's young, she wants to do something to change the world, and she wants to have a purpose. And that is what I think young people need, a purpose. Who wants to work for a company that is just as any other company? Nobody wants that. You want to do something, otherwise your talents are wasted. And I think in this symposium, this seminar or webinar, we have a lot of young people with a lot of talent. And I would say one thing to you: don't waste your talents working for a multinational like, for example, Coca-Cola. You all know the criminal organization Coca-Cola. It is a criminal organization producing 3,500 single-use plastic bottles per second. It is the biggest producer of single-use plastics in the world, heavily polluting the planet. Who wants to work for that? Well, after those opening statements, I quickly share my screen. And so let me see, select the screen, that I do it right. Yeah, I have it. I think you can see this, and I don't want to enlarge it with running the risk that you lose the screen. So assuming that you can see this, I will run you quickly through the presentation. I want to say something about sustainable development. I want to say a lot about having a purpose in your life. Why are you here? Why are you on the planet? And the role for young talent, well, the role for young people. I've always told my children, if you ever work for a company, work for a sustainable company, because all the other companies have no future. So having said that, I do a very short introduction of myself, because I think that is polite, and it also is helpful because it puts my presentation into a certain perspective. So I am an activist as well. An activist means that I don't only speak, but I do what I say. I founded 2 large European platforms for sustainable companies. One is B Lab, I'll say something about the B Corps later on. And the other one was Social Venture Network. Social Venture Network is the oldest network of entrepreneurs in the world that have a goal, a purpose. I created 20 tech startups. I started the first artificial intelligence company in the Netherlands, then moved to Silicon Valley and created the first virtual reality company in 1994. So my background is technology and sustainability. I'm a farmer, as you can see, so I work out of my farm in the southwest of France, where I have a bio farm for walnuts, which is a superfood. And so I am working in the world of food, which is an important topic for the planet, for the future, but I want to do that in a, let's say, bio way, in a sustainable way. And I wrote some books. If you go to and look at the current world, you can think that we are in the midst of chaos. We are in a COVID crisis. But just this morning, I was talking here on my farm is a very, very old man. And that old man had, I think he was so old that he had also been in World War I, World War II, an economical crisis that we have had before, the Spanish flu. So that man had lived in all kinds of troublesome situations. He said, this COVID crisis is nothing. It's just a glitch in what the world is going for. And the world, I think, is heading for much more chaos than we currently have. So what is important for young people is to understand that chaos is an opportunity, and that chaos is not scary, and that fear is strong. Fear gives you strength. Embrace your fear, because the world that we live in, that sometimes seems so great, are soap bubbles, as you can see here. Beautiful, but unreal. There is a terrible division of wealth going on in the world. So when you talk about sustainability, it is not about climate and climate change, because climate change is useless if we don't have an underlying systemic change. I always use the following example. If you have a train heading on the rail, the train track, towards a bridge, but the bridge is broken, so an accident will happen, and the train is going forward, moving towards that crack in the railroad, moving forward, and the train is driven by coal and oil. And we're now changing that coal and oil into sustainable energy. But the train keeps on going. We don't change the train. I would dare to say that then the whole move towards sustainable energy is useless. If we don't have a systemic change that goes much further than the climate change, well, we might as well not solve it. So when you as young people are moving forward, do you want to be successful, or do you want to have a value in this world? Because we have no planet B. Sometimes we have people like Elon Musk, they think we should go to Mars. Oh, silly Elon Musk. Because we go to Mars and then we fuck up Mars. So, and then we go to another planet and we destroy that planet. So let's use that money to solve the challenges that we have on this planet instead of a ridiculous move to Mars. You know, it is the problems that we have on this planet are very easy. I sometimes think we just don't have enough resources for the people that we have on the planet. We don't have enough food. We don't have enough water. Water is going to be one of the biggest problems on the planet. It's much bigger than the climate change. Water, we don't have enough water for the people already in many places on the planet. There is no clean water. There's only polluted water. And cleaning the water, even in the Netherlands, is going to be more and more expensive every time. So what you see here, and this is a very interesting picture that was made by Kate Raworth. Many of you will probably know that the donut economy, it's worth reading. And you see that on the outside, we have something that we have a shortage of: clean air, clean oceans. And on the inside, we have shortage of food, social equality, and that all those topics together are what was said, I think, by Roelof, the holistic view of sustainability, the holistic view, the well-being of the people on this planet, as Roelof mentioned it. If you go then to this picture, you see that Indonesia is on the left top side, which means that if we would live all on this planet like the people on, let's say, the United States, which is on the right-hand side, then already in May, we would end up by consuming all the planet's resources that we have for a year. So we call this the Earth Overshoot Day. And the Earth Overshoot Day is the moment for the whole planet. It's July 29, 2019. It will be a little bit earlier in 2020. It's the day, the moment in the year when we as a planet consume as much as the planet can replenish for us. And Indonesia is doing quite well in here, as you can see. So Indonesia, I don't know what the let's say the causes of that are. Maybe people have less to eat, have less to consume. But in any case, if we on the whole planet would live as the people in Indonesia would live, the Earth Overshoot Day would be in December. And you can measure that for yourself as well in an ecological footprint. We have spoken, the former speaker, about the SDG pyramid. The thing that I always want to say about the SDGs is it is the compass for the future, but nobody knows it. Of course, there are some people that know it, but I was giving a lecture to 200 teachers for basic grammar schools in the Netherlands a couple of months ago. And 200 teachers teaching children about the future. And I asked them, who of you has heard of the SDGs? Out of the 200 teachers, there were 2 teachers who had heard of it. 2. And it actually pissed me off. You know, I said to the teachers, how can you bring these children to the future if you have no clue about its compass yourself? So it actually disappointed me. And I realized that there is very, very few people, maybe governments, maybe some people in bigger organizations that know what the SDGs are and what you can do with it. So I gave you the example of Coca-Cola because not only governments are changing, but companies luckily are changing. And I'm very sad about Coca-Cola because we spoke about the plastic, the bottles that they produce, 3,500 per second. And we didn't even talk what is in the bottles, you know, that causes gigantic obesity. And that is, it's not healthy at all. The good sign is that you have companies that are changing. And this is the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal number 12, responsible consumption and production. And what you see is that small and mid-sized companies are now moving into that direction. And those companies are the companies that you as young people should work for because they will help and build the future. Tony Chocolonely in the Netherlands, Stonyfield is organic yogurt, a great company, Moïse Coffee. They produce the coffee in the country where the coffee grows. Instead of that, they bring the beans to rich countries like the Netherlands and they produce the coffee there. No, the margins, the profit margins with producing the coffee in the countries in Ethiopia stay in Ethiopia. Fairphone. And luckily, there are many companies. So you see a change in companies moving towards sustainability very pragmatically. And also Unilever and Ben & Jerry's, you know, the ice cream of Ben & Jerry's. They have discovered that when they produce a product with a story of social sustainability, so they have a product and that product means something to the planet, the profit on those products is higher. Well, now you can say, is sustainability about profitability? Well, I don't care what it is about, as when it helps. So when a food giant like Unilever, which in general is not sustainable at all, but if the food giant starts to think that maybe they do better business, longer term business, when they move to sustainability, then we are on the right track. And when you look at society, you see that the whole society, due to COVID and Corona, is fundamentally changing, and that is good, I think. So what you see, let me go through quickly through this picture. If you look at teaching, at training, at schooling, you see that individual training, distant learning is popping up necessarily because people don't want to go to classes anymore, people don't want to go to colleges. So that probably means that the quality, more individualistic, is not necessarily going down. So you see a movement into that kind of learning. Also in the field of healthcare, you see more appreciation of healthcare people. You see people clapping, people having signs on the walls or outside of their windows thanking the people in healthcare. And there is more transparency now in producing medicine, in telling how many people are sick and not. So Corona created a change, a speed up in change in healthcare. And if you then look at food production, I think that Roelof also mentioned that local organic food is what people appreciate. Why do we in the Netherlands need to eat strawberries every season? Flying fruit, flying vegetables in from all over the world in airplanes. Why is that? Polluting the planet. Why don't we also only have our locally produced, organically produced foods? So that is also now a question that is coming up. Cheaper and cleaner energies, still very important. A total reset of mobility. You see no more traffic jams when people are in Corona. People start to think, can we work from our homes? And that was, technically already possible for many, many, many years, but it didn't happen. And a fair division of wealth. Why is it that 6 people on the planet need to have as much money as 50% of the total population of the planet? Why is that? That is ridiculous. It is ridiculous that the owner of Facebook, using all of your assets, your data, becomes hugely wealthy, and the people who provide that data don't get anything. Yeah, they get Facebook, but for the rest they have nothing. Local production with value for society. So people are starting to think, companies now, what I produce, why do I produce it? And an increasing role of government. And I can tell you that is important, an increasing role of government. Because if we want to solve the overarching problems, like who owns the oceans? Who owns the sky? Nobody owns the oceans. And because nobody owns the oceans, nobody cares about the pollution. Well, everybody cares about the pollution, but nobody does something about it. So very logically, we see a consequence now that only sustainable companies over the coming decades will survive. So if you, as a young person, want to bring something of value to the planet, you work for sustainable companies, and you just don't give anything about companies who don't have that long-term vision. That, in my opinion, is sustainability, and that, in my opinion, is what we or you as young people should support, because for the rest, we're almost too late, in my opinion. And there is a lot of work to do in Indonesia, in the rest of the world, in the Netherlands, where many of you are. But we need a systemic change. And I sometimes wonder who inspires you. You're inspired by a person, you're inspired by a book. But I always think the person that can inspire you the most is yourself. People get the most energy out of their own passions. So if somebody wants to change the world, that gives you the energy. And you as a person can be the change. You don't have to wait for anybody. You can create a company, you can work for an institution or a country or a company that really wants to make a change. But don't lose your time working for companies like Shell, working for companies like Coca-Cola, working for companies, cigarette companies, British American Tobacco, that only produces something that kills people. Can you imagine that? That you work for a company and you produce a product that kills people. Well, that is a great purpose, isn't it? You know, and having a purpose, using your talents, having a purpose, being the change. So, having said that, I would like to thank you for your attention. I could have spoken much longer about these topics, but I'm certain there will be questions and that we will, or that I can answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Lane. After this, we would like to play a video about your book, Once Upon a Future. Yeah. Okay, the team, can you play the video about Mr. Lane's book, Once Upon a Future?
Imagine once upon a future without climate chaos, loss of biodiversity, water shortage, fundamentalism, growing poverty, failing capitalism, accumulating protests. But we still live now. In an era where we have disruption and great revolutions. Now is our time, your time. A new world is being born. It's a new world that requires a shift from ego to eco, and from welfare to well-being. This world offers us a future that is much better and nicer than most people think. We are just here to give you clarity and show you the connections. So hey, wake up. It's about you and about your children. Connect with the emerging future. Try to understand it and seize the opportunities. Because once we were able to say, once upon a future, and this moment is now. Discover what you can do yourself.
Yes, that's a short video about Mr. Lane's book, Once Upon a Future. Yeah, we are now entering the Q&A session. Now I'd like to read some questions from the audience. Just a reminder that you may write down questions in the live chat in the YouTube, addressed to our speakers. So the first question that I highlight here is that it's specifically directed to Mr. Roelof. Mr. Roelof, could you please tell us where is your project in Indonesia? I mean the location.
Yeah, we're still discussing it with the NGOs, Sumatra, NTT.
Yeah.
But we are defining the right locations at the moment.
Yeah. Beside that question, I mean, based on your previous experiences, what was the role of the youth, the younger generation in your project? I mean, how is their involvement in your project? The youth.
Right. Yeah. Within our company, we have young people, and we are a social enterprise. So I started it 10 years ago, not as a young person because I'm 60, but from the time when I was very young, I always wanted to contribute to better healthcare and sharing what we have. I think we are very blessed in the West, and as Lane says, it's an opportunity right now that we really can do things together. And as many students are watching, I believe that all the skills that they're gathering now, they already have from their genes, but also studying, whether it's yesterday I mentioned, whether it's finance, whether it's politics, if you combine all these skills, especially for Indonesia, for instance, we need new ideas of going into the rural area. So with this whole healthy village idea, the financial structure behind it, we need smart people, young people that can make new business models. Not only selling or getting a one-time grant or something, but there, for instance, franchise models that we have where a small entrepreneur can start business, but not only focusing on the rich people, but since the community is also shareholder, they also kind of are in that together. But also you need the incentive of an entrepreneur. So I think entrepreneurs, as Lane mentioned, are really important to help change the areas where we believe that it's not possible to change, because young people, they know that they can make changes and they have the energy, and that's why we sponsor this event, because we want to invest in the young people and work with them in the future.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move to the next question. The next question, I think it will be suitable for Mr. Lane, I think. But other speakers can also answer to this question. I mean, I can direct this question specifically to Mr. Lane. I would like to know your opinion on sustainability and its relation with the development of palm oil business. Would those topics like find a meeting point under the spirit of sustainability practice? I mean, like, can sustainability and palm oil business go hand in hand together? Is it possible? I mean, what do you think about that? Yeah.
Well, when the first thing when I talk about sustainability, I would say I only can look at it in a holistic way. You know, sustainability. How do you treat your people? What is the well-being, as Rudolf has said, of the people, instead of only the let's say the welfare or only your simple health. So I would say that we are living in an economy where we think it is necessary that we grow all the time. I'm an economist, and as an economist, I've always learned that we have to grow. I think we do not have to grow. I think we have to be very smart about the concept of growth. Some countries have to shrink, and maybe some others have to grow. So if you put then the question of palm oil, palm oil in essence maybe is not so bad. But if you want to grow all the time and you start to cut forests down and you plant palm trees to create palm oil, then you destroy more than you create for. So the balance in what you produce and what you create and what you destroy is wrong. So can a palm oil company, a multinational palm oil company, be sustainable in the current economic environment? In general, no, I would say. And but it is you see many questions, like also the questions of a carbon policy are mistreated, are not put in the right economic system, in my opinion. For example, if you think, well, is now sustainable energy cheaper than not sustainable energy? And people say, well, we subsidize electricity and solar energy. Shouldn't we stop subsidizing it? Well, we need to realize that the oil and coal industries have been subsidized magnificently over the past 100 years. It's the biggest subsidized industry that we have on the planet. So the real cost and profits for the planet we don't. There's an institute that's called the True Cost Institute, and the True Cost Institute creates now what does it really cost us as a planet to, for example, to move industry of clothing to India or to China. Is that cheaper? Well, how do we calculate the transport? How do we calculate the slavery that we have in those businesses? So if you calculate everything in, as we do not do now, let's, for example, gasoline at the pump would be 10 times as expensive as it is now. So, of course, we should never have a discussion about sustainable energy like electricity from solar. Who is going to pay for that? That's the discussion that we have in Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we have the energy transition. Who pays for it? It's a nonsense discussion. Absolutely nonsense. It should be a discussion who profits from it, who gains from that, instead of who pays for it. Because of course it's cheaper. It's way cheaper if you calculate all the costs in. And that is the same with palm oil and sustainability. What is the real cost of palm oil? The real cost of palm oil is probably much more than what it currently is. Because we don't calculate in the destruction of forests, we don't calculate in the transportation CO2 cost. So it is, but it is a, the discussions in all those areas are actually always a little bit more difficult than what they are presented by the populist politicians who want to make everything simple. And that is, so that is what I can say about it.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for the answer. Okay, moving to the next question. This is specifically directed to Mr. Sony. And the question is from Berta Tanaim. What would you suggest for us, Indonesian youth, to take the environment and climate change issue more seriously? So maybe small suggestion that all we can do.
Thank you, Aldi. But if I may comment, respond to Lee a little bit would be great.
Yeah, you can also follow up that question first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lynn, thank you for your interesting insight and also for acknowledging that things are always, or things can be presented even simpler than it is in reality. So I really appreciate it. And like for me and some colleagues working in Indonesia, these are sort of the challenge that we face. You may see two scientists bringing their own science, claiming that palm oil are bad for the environment and the palm oil is good for the economy. Now, how do we deal with such claims? And this is the thrill about working on policy and science policy interface in Indonesia. So if it is as simple as those claiming that it's good or bad, then we have settled, right, with the issue. That's not really the case. So what we are trying to bring in the whole discussion and discourse on this is, please see it as a system. And we know even science are compartmentalized the way they see things. Now, Indonesia can no longer say that it will ignore, because it's an industry, and we export our palm oil and derivatives to, say, Europe. And people in Europe are changing. From consumers, they reflect it into electoral vote, and that's why the European Parliament are opposing Indonesian palm oil. So it's like a circle, and Indonesia has to take that into account. And at the same time, we need to acknowledge that in Indonesia, the alternative to palm oil are still lacking at the moment. So these are, the areas where we need to push the debate and advance the discussion. This is not easy, but I think this is something that we need to pursue further and come up with alternatives. I think that very interesting that you mentioned all the donut economics and so on. These are very interesting, but operationalizing it, putting into context, like in Indonesia, these are challenging at the moment. and in the context of Indonesia, one has to deal with, contested politics, different preferences, different, whether labor union or small farmers, smallholders of palm oil are represented in the politics are issues that go way beyond these. So that's more or less the comment. But I really appreciate your thought on these and fully agree. So I second to that. But then there's some second, further layers on these that we need to really discuss in context.
Yeah.
Now to the question of Bertha, thank you for asking it. I'm not in the position of suggesting. I know everyone is unique. Used to study long time in Europe, in Germany. So it may not really fit to everyone. But if you ask me what I'm going to do, sort of trying to put in your shoes, what I'm going to do is I will educate myself. By training, I'm an environmental economist, ecological economist, my master in econometrics. But I will spend my time reading philosophy books, arts. I will visit museums until the guard there kick me out of the museum when it needs to be closed. And that's what I did when I did my PhD and my master in Europe. I did not have saving. I just visit very unique places in Europe just to have sense of Europe, how diverse it is. So please, if you have some, you guys are privileged in the Netherlands, in Europe, so spend time. Another thing will be networking. You know better than I do, so please do it. Another one will be maintaining your expectations. We have LPDP at the moment, so that there are supply of intellectuals, of graduates like you coming to Indonesia. So maintain your level of expectation. They are fighting each other. And given COVID, you don't have you don't have opportunities like compared to say my time where European graduates are like, now it's not really the case. So maintain your expectation. Another one would be just try to do things that you are so passionate about. I think Lynn mentioned, Lynn or Solope about not only being successful, but successful can be defined in different ways, but being of value and looking at climate, sustainability, water issue, energy issue, poverty, I think is already in the right pathway. So where you may encounter different issues, but I think it will make you more wise and even love the challenges that you intend to tackle. And by doing what you're passionate about, I think there will be opportunity to learn from your mistakes, but also gains, something that you can learn from. So that's again, that's myself. So I'm not telling or imposing this will be the best one. No. So I think you will have the what you're going to do. But yeah, I'll stop at that.
Perhaps Mr. Roloff has some kind of follow-up to the question in palm oil business versus sustainability. No.
Yeah, well, I'm more into healthcare, so it's not my specialty, and I think already a lot of mentioned about that. So I would.
So yeah, I can just move on to the next question. It's from Aisha Tamara. The question is addressed to Mr. Lin. How might big FMCG giants ensure regenerative business that operate within the planetary boundaries and go beyond greenwashing or SDG washing?
Yeah, it is a very good question. And to explain to people what the question really means, because not everybody knows what FMCG, it means fast-moving consumer goods. And for example, a company like Danone or Unilever, they are kind of fast-moving consumer goods companies, food companies, global companies. But the question is that these big companies, how can they prove to the consumer that what they do is good? and to make the company the question simple, and that is sustainable. And I can tell you that for the companies that are considering the big FMCGs or the multinationals that are considering to move into that direction, it is a gigantic move. It is not simple at all. For example, Danone as a company has decided to become a B Corp. The B Corp stands for, as Paul Polman used to be the CEO of Unilever, one of the biggest food companies in the world. And Paul Polman has said, well, when a company moves to become a B Corp, it's the Champions League of sustainability. And you get a certification, a qualification holistically, not on a product only or on one thing or one division, but holistically on the whole company. So Danone decided a couple of years ago to become a B Corp. Well, first of all, they had to go to the shareholders of such a company. And they had to say to the shareholders, dear shareholders, do you accept that we no longer put you on the number one spot, but we talk about stakeholders, about everybody who is involved? And that answer of the shareholders was yes. Probably the answer was yes, because the shareholders thought that if we do this, we make more profit or not less. So to be very honest and realistic. But then the company Danone moved into a trajectory of 10 years. So country after country, they are now testing and analyzing their own companies to see if they do sustainable business. So it will take a period of 10 years to change the company fundamentally into a company that is not doing greenwashing or SDG washing, as it is not called. You still see many, many companies, by the way, who say, we have a department on the SDGs, or we have a sustainability manager who is taking care of everything. There's a tremendous amount of greenwashing going on. And to go back to Danone, which is a huge company, they are also in Indonesia. They have an Indonesian company, I think it's called Aqua, and they produce water. They put it in plastic bottles. And so the question was, how can such a company become a sustainable company if they produce all those plastic bottles in that are a problem for the environment in Indonesia? So the first program they had to start, they were forced to start, and they wanted to start is, can we put it in different kinds of carrying material? Can we produce the bottles in a different way? Can we do it in stone paper or some other way? And that is so, it stimulates, if you have the right kind of company, the decision to move into a sustainable direction stimulates all kinds of good movements. But it is very hard to do, and it will take a lot of time. So any company, and that's how you can recognize the greenwashing, any company that all of a sudden says, we are going to be sustainable, don't believe that. You know, maybe they want something, but the hardship and the fights that you have with your shareholders, the changes that you have to make in the company are tremendous. So, but the good thing in the end is that the B Corp community has about 3,500 B Corps all over the world, and they are now forcing their small and mid-sized companies, they're now forcing the bigger companies to change because the consumers want that. So there's good things about it, but it will take a lot of time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm curious. You frequently mentioned about younger generation don't work for the unsustainable company because they have no future. But the fact is that, like you mentioned, you mentioned like Dan and like
It goes even further. It goes even further. Research has been done in this area. So and research has shown, not one research project, but several, has shown that talented young people prefer to work for a company with a purpose. So what you see now in the war for talent, every company wants only talented people, of course. So in the war for talent, you see that the talented young people are looking, trying to find companies that mean something for the world. So it's not me that is making this up. It's the young people themselves. And on top of that, I advise my children and everybody that wants to listen that I personally believe that companies with a sustainable long-term vision have the future. They don't only have the future, it's also more fun to work for them. You know, it's more fun to work for a company that you can tell your friends and your partner and your community that you're working for a company that means something. It's much more fun than telling I'm working for British American Tobacco, you know.
Yeah. It's I mean, like, it's interesting. I mean, it's a really good piece of advice. I mean, like, start working with a company that really care about environment, really sustainable. But I mean, like, I remember what Mr. Sonny Mumbunan said about when we speak about the Netherlands, for example, and Indonesia. It's not comparable. I mean, like, the condition is different. The context is so much different. How do you see that problem? I mean, how do you see that perspective? Because if I can say is that that's so Western perspective. I mean, like, that's applicable for society when they have settled down the problem of poverty or something, and then the thing will be different when we put into the context of developing nations. I mean, like, how do you think about that? Perhaps other speakers will respond to my question.
Can I give a start, a short start?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Over the past 4 months, I've been doing podcast interviews with leaders of B Corps. So those leaders of sustainable companies. There's about 170 B Corps in Chile. And is Chile a developing country? They think themselves they are. So, and I've spoken to leaders in Africa of B Corps. I've spoken to leaders in other Latin American countries. And I am inclined to disagree with what you say. That I think that you cannot actually say when a country is out of the status of developing and is a richer country, it is different. Well, if you think about the Maslow pyramid, you would be inclined to say, well, if I have my food and my roof and my health, I can start to think about other things. But already food, roof, and health has to do with sustainability. And that is, as Roelof said, what the work that he is doing. So, you know, in your health, in your work for health, all the stages that those countries are in, maybe I could even say they have an advantage sometimes, because countries that are maybe developing or in a developing phase, they can jump ahead of countries like the Netherlands. So we are, in a sense, as developed countries, whatever that means, we are a little bit handicapped by the status quo. And if you are, and that is the optimism that I tasted with the leaders in Peru, for example, and Chile and Colombia, who said, well, when we want to make these steps, we immediately want to do that in a sustainable way, because then we are ahead already of the others. And I can tell you that people, normal people who don't normally talk about sustainability, using the word sustainability, always talk about having a good life, having a healthy life, taking care of your children, treating your neighbors well. You know, that is all about sustainability. So everybody wants to live a life like that, an honest life. Everybody thinks that a dishonesty in financial division is wrong. You know, so I think that the way that people could and should treat it in Indonesia, I'm not an Indonesian, but I would say almost maybe they have an advantage over us here in the Netherlands.
Yeah. Okay. Other speakers want to follow up the discussion? Yeah. Or should I move? There's one question for Mr. Sony. Well, moving on from the discussion on like previously about Danone, is there any government policy that enforces environmental standards to private companies in Indonesia from the perspective of government? Perhaps you can give insight.
Yeah, there are different policies or
Yeah.
set of policies that enforce environmental standard for compliance on companies, and that applies in different sectors. The thing is whether that these policies are being consequently implemented, or when it turns out that, for instance, a company that is burning forests, for instance, are proven, then whether it is going to pay for the loss, then these are another questions. But if the question is whether we have this kind of policy, we do have that policy.
Yeah. Okay. We still have 2-3 questions from the audience. I think I can see. Okay. This is again. There's a question from Sahnas Natasha. I have a question. I have a psychology and behavioral research background. Could you tell us about the psychology of sustainable development? The psychology of sustainable development that might be important or relevant for future research. It's a bit of a research-related question. Psychology, perhaps. Any of Mr. Roloff.
Yeah, I would be interested. During disaster and conflict, also COVID, people are isolated. We see that now in COVID, but we see that also in other disasters. People lose their family members, their business is disrupted, they are in psychological need. And so I really think it's really important, like I mentioned yesterday, that we have experts like you just mentioned what you're studying, to go and help and be of assistance. If you have something like 1,000 disasters in Indonesia every year, the impact is really great on communities, on children, for instance. So I think, it's really important that people like you study the consequences of crises and what it does with families, what it does with communities, and try to help in that way.
Maybe I can add something, Roelof, to what you just said, because I completely agree. But what you see, and I think you also probably see that, is that we are living apparently in a world where we try to avoid any risk or any uncertainty that we can. We are trying to. When I was young, children went out to play for the whole day, and then in the evening they came home. Well, nowadays, the parents are so terrified that they stay with their children. They want to have games. They want to have, So the people are striving, also politicians, for the avoidance of risk. On the one hand, so we see a society that is moving in that direction of how can we avoid all kinds of risk. While, in my opinion, we see a future society with more uncertainty coming, because COVID will be over, and as was presented earlier, we will have a new problem and we will have a new challenge, and then we have a new challenge and a new challenge. So, and in my perception, that will come quicker and quicker after the other. So we see a gap, I think, that is an interesting topic for research, between the striving for certainty and security and the rising uncertainty and insecurity. So that is going to. I wonder how that will. It will definitely create a lot of psychological problems with many people. As stress is being seen as the biggest disease of the 21st century already.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Moving on to the next question, I think it's there's a question for Mr. Sony from Fahira. Very inspiring presentation. My question will be, what is your opinion on our country's plan to move our capital to Borneo and dangers, and it sends dangers to our forests? And what is there any relation to our pledge to lower emissions by 2030? And like, is it something that can go hand in hand, or there's, yeah, that's basically the question. Yeah.
Thank you, Fahira. The question is the move of Indonesia's capital from Jakarta to Kalimantan. I think there are reasons for that, political ones, but also objective ones, that are supporting or suggesting the move of the capital. For instance, given the pressures, including environmental pressures on Java and urban sprawl surrounding Jakarta. So there are, I think there are reasons to move the capital. But as you rightly mentioned, that Fahir has mentioned, there are also possibilities that it may also reduce the integrity of the ecosystem in Borneo, which is to some degree already deteriorating at the moment.
Yeah.
So I think it will be depending a lot, and that also depends on us. The way we envisions about the new capital, the way we ensure, say, the environmental analysis and recommendations for the new capital, which is something to be seen. So if the question is whether it endangers the forest, there is potential for that. But whether it is going to be a reality, that will depend a lot on what I said. Yeah, and how does it relate to the pledge of lower emission by 2030? There are different ways how it relates to the pledge. But if you look at again, compared to Papua, for instance, Kalimantan has has degraded forests and some deforestation, not as dramatic as Sumatra, but it is already concerning. And in the north, in Provinsi Kalimantan Utara, North Kalimantan, it is one of the Indonesia so-called intact rainforests. So if the new capital has a development effect or spatial effect that may induce encroachment of forest, for instance, in the north, then it will release carbon and reduce carbon absorption capacity in the north, for instance, which may be, given the large extent of the forest in the north, then it will just compromise our pledge. Because forests like in North Kalimantan or in Papua, if we reduce, say, the forest cover around 10%, now it's around 80 something, 87. Say if it reduces to say 80 or 75, then it releases more carbon than the entire Indonesia commitment to UNFCCC. So this is not non-negligible. It's really significant. So just to put things into the context.
Yeah.
But again, this depends on us, and the way we craft policies, the way we influence decision-making process, that will depend a lot on the Indonesian, the citizens of Indonesians and colleagues outside. For instance, in terms of palm oil industry, the global value chain, and so on and so forth, to enforce or to ensure that some environmental sustainability or to put what Lynn mentioned about the true cost of these, proposals are also taken into account, so that we have a full picture of what we are going to have if we do such things, for instance.
Yeah. Interesting. There's still one question specifically addressed to Mr. Roloff. Living in a world full of uncertainties or externalities, especially disasters and so on, how can industries remain sustainable in the long term, from your perspective as a CEO?
Well, that's a good question. Gives me food to thought.
It's a really wide.
Full of uncertainties. Well, I think as a company, you always should be renewing yourself, be learning, be curious to see how the world is changing. And as mentioned before, the threats, the risks that we are facing, we are living in a world with uncertainty. So if we are flexible, if we are lean, if we try new things, if we want to make mistakes, I think then we can survive. If not, if we stick to our what we used to do, or shareholders' values or whatever, I think we will. The companies will not survive. So adapting, being creative, and I think that's also those are also characteristics of young people. And that's why I think that young people are so important to start new companies that look to look differently to the reality and see where can we help, what can we do, what can I do from my experience, my background. And any background, any study that you're doing can be helpful, can be sustainable if you are flexible, if you really look to the problems, if you're creative, if you try, if you want to fail, if you trust other people to work with. Probably you will be hurt, but I think if you try, I think there's a bigger future for those companies than for the bigger companies.
Can I
Yes,
add
thank you.
something to that, Roelof?
Yeah.
Because again,
Yeah.
I fully agree with what you say, but I was a little bit surprised by the question of Tamara, because it seems the other way around from what it really is. So it seems that, what I've said, companies cannot survive when they're not sustainable. So the long-term way forward for any company is being sustainable. So as Roelof described, and we are heading a world of more uncertainties and more externalities. And externalities is an interesting word, because if we start to calculate those externalities into monetary terms, then the only way forward is being sustainable. Because then we see the damage that those externalities, by the way, there's also positive externalities, but that the negative externalities.
Negative in this context is negative, yeah.
Yeah, and that is, so I would say that how can industries remain sustainable? That is not the question. The question is only industries that are sustainable will survive. And that is, and the rest, they'll be too expensive. Nobody will want to buy the products. They will be no people that want to work for them. So they run out of resources. So that will take decades, I think. That will not go quick, but that is the way forward, I would say, for the planet.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for the additional remark, Sir Lane. Okay, that's basically the last question that we have. But we have covered all the questions, and before we close the webinar, I'll try to make a small recap of what we have discussed. First, I highlight that young people can start to find purpose in their career, in their life, in how they think about environment and the future. And the second thing is that SDG involve complexity, when we put the issues into the context of policy and decision making. It's not as easy as like changing the whole complexity. And the third one is that we need both direction, systemic change, top to bottom approach, and small change that gradually can change the whole system. And the fourth thing is that companies have to follow how the world is changing. Companies also have to lean and flexible to survive in the future, and do not stick only to the shareholders' values. And also, young people can start the company from now. Yeah, that's the small recap that I can highlight. Is there any? Is there something that can that you want to add in the remark? Perhaps, Mr. Roloff, do you have something to add? As a closing statement.
Yeah. Actually, we are very honored to be invited also to sponsor.
Yes.
And as we have said as speakers before, we believe in the youth, the power of the youth, and we would like to encourage you all to do your best, be creative, think out of the box, take risk, and think about your purpose, what's been said. What do you really want in life? If you're 70, 80, or at the end of your life, if you look back, can you be proud of what you achieved for Indonesia? I think that's a good question. And whether you are a Muslim, a Christian, or not a believer, but I think there's more in our life than only eating and working for money. There are spiritual things as well, and tap into those sources as well, and ask for power to be a hero. That's what I would like to say to you.
Thank you. Mr. Soni, perhaps you have something to add as a closing remark.
Thank you, Aldi. So again, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be part of this discussion and exchanges with panelists. Thank you, PPI Belanda and all the team. You've done great job, and I've been following the part of the today's occasion, and this is amazing. If I may wish that I wish you all success, whether you're coming back to Indonesia or you plan to stay in Europe or elsewhere. Semoga sehat-sehat juga di masa COVID.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Next, Mr. Lane, perhaps you have something as a closing remark. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for your moderation, and Roloff and Mr. Soni for the great views and the great interaction that we had. I like that. I think it is important to have those discussions, and even important not to always agree, and not to be mad at somebody that doesn't agree with you, as happens on many places in the world. So the real discussion and sharing of opinions seems to be lost sometimes, and because people have either think this or that. So having said that, I wrote down what I wanted to say at the end as a closing statement. It's actually the same as what Roloff said in different words, but I can still say it is, when I look back on my life, and what Roloff said, if you look back on your life, I've always tried to do what I liked to do, and with a purpose. So I don't see use in spending or wasting my time. I call it wasting my time in spending energy on stuff that doesn't really matter. And I almost cannot imagine that you, as young people, would want to waste your talent and your energy on stuff that doesn't matter. So, and everybody has a passion. Everybody has something that he or she really likes. And sometimes we think that passion doesn't bring you money or doesn't have any value, well, then you, I think, are wrong, because your passion gives you the energy to do stuff that you like. And you will be surprised how useful that is, because there are an unbelievable amount of opportunities currently in the world, especially in this crisis, to pick up. So there is for everybody, I'm certain there is something that you can use. Passion has a value because it gives in it energy, and you are going to inspire yourself, as all entrepreneurs do. Entrepreneurs inspire themselves, and in order to have the energy to do what they want to do. So that's what I would like to add.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Lane. Yeah, we appreciate all of our speakers for taking into consideration this webinar and sharing their insights about sustainability in these odd times, I should say. Yeah, before I end this session, I would like to invite the audience to fill the evaluation form through the link given in the live chat or through the QR code on the screen. By filling this form, you might get an e-certificate. So yeah, please fill the form. And the link will be closed 15 minutes after this session ends. So yeah, on behalf of the Indonesian Youthquake 2020 team, I'd like to extend our gratitude to the enthusiasm of the audience and apologize for any mistakes made. I'd like to say thank you again to all of our speakers for the expertise and the experience and sharing sessions. And also, this also marks the end of the series of events of Indonesian Youthquake 2020. So thank you very much for your enthusiasm. And to properly close the webinar, please enjoy a performance by the group Potato. Thank you.
Kemana langkahmu menuju? Apa yang membuat engkau ragu? Tujuan sejati menunggumu sudah. Tetaplah pada pendirian.